Download for Brandon on this or not?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold on. We're going.
Hey, I see that it looks like we're live on Facebook. We're here, Facebook. Welcome. My name is Michael Hellickson, and as you can tell, I'm coming to you from a hotel room somewhere in Wilmington, North Carolina. I see water over here, and I know I'm in Wilmington. That's about all I can tell you. So that said, my name is Michael Hellickson. I'm one of the coaches here at Club Wealth Coaching and Consulting. And with me today are two of our other coaches who are also baller agents. My co-host, of course, Mr. Brian Curtis. And I say Mr., it's Mr. Coach Brian Curtis. And Brian is in Bentonville, Arkansas. And if you don't know where that's at, you may have to look it up on Google like I did. But I will tell you this, it is in the middle of nowhere, but somehow, some way, Brian finds a way to sell 330 homes a year in this town in the middle of nowhere and does it with style. So Brian, thank you for being our co-host today. Love having you on. And then we have Mr. Brandon. Everybody in my state is freezing their butt off. Landro, who is also a coach for Club Wealth. He's in the beautiful, cheesy state of Wisconsin, where I believe everything is pretty much white there today. Is that not true?
The snow all went south of us. I'm looking out the window at some snow piles and pavement.
Are you serious? Oh, but I bet it's cold.
Can't do anything. It's 26, 28 degrees. This has been a very mild winter.
That 26 is mild. That's great. Oh my gosh, that sounds terrible.
Don't even zip the coat up at 26.
Oh my gosh. Well, Brandon, for those of you that don't know, is also a Club Wealth coach. And Brandon is a baller. So does very well in his brokerage, does really well on his team. About 500 units this year. Is that right? Am I getting that number wrong, right? Somewhere in that number?
Yeah, we finished 2018 about 470.
Oh my gosh, that's weak. 470. Way to be an underachiever, Brandon. That's awesome, man. 470 units. How many people on this planet will ever close 470 units in a year? Well, what's really cool about Brandon, there's so many things. The list goes on and on and on. I could tell you, all kinds of things about him that would impress you and that would excite you and get you wanting to learn from him. But let me start with this. Brandon has got not only his brokerage, not only his local team, but he's also now in expansion markets and he's doing well with it. And that's difficult to do. And it's very rare that you find people that do well with their expansion program. It's hard to do. Most people fail at it for years before they finally get it right. Brandon got it right from day one and has been doing well with it. You got it right. How's that?
Got it right enough.
Yeah, so Brandon, first of all, tell us about kind of your journey. Start with, talk to us about your journey through Club Wealth, because when you first came to Club Wealth, you really were primarily a broker. Now you're a broker and you've got your team, and then you've also transitioned now into expansion. So walk us through that progression.
Yeah, I started coaching with Club Wealth and with Michael directly, I want to say September of 2016, so a little over 2 years ago. And I was exclusively a broker owner. I started our brokerage. I got into real estate when I was 20 years old. And it was what I was going to do until I figured out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So we'll see if I ever figure it out. But after 2 years, I didn't like the independent broker that I was working for, and I was thinking about my options. And in Wisconsin at the time, you could go out and you could get your broker's license pretty early. So I went out and got mine. And very short time after my second anniversary with my company, I walked into my broker's office and said, this isn't working out for me. And they wished me well. And little did they know I was driving across town to go to the MLS and sign paperwork. And so at 22, going on 23 years old, we started our own independent brokerage. And that was in 2006. So now I'm been doing that for years and years. I went through one coaching company and nothing against them. I had some growth with that company, but I felt like I definitely plateaued after a little more than a year and took a few months off and realized I got a tremendous amount out of coaching. Again, nothing against the other company. They got me where I was. I was happy with that, but I needed to grow and I needed more. So I started looking around online and found Michael Hellickson and his offer to do a 55-minute strategy session. And I think that turned into about 2 hours with me. And I realized how messed up my business had been for so long. and how much opportunity I really had in front of me. So I started coaching with Michael, and after he immediately told me, the brokerage is fantastic. You're doing some excellent production on your own. My wife and I worked together at the time. We were doing over 100 transactions a year just for the two of us. But we were working as much as you would imagine it takes to do that and run a brokerage. And it wasn't what we wanted to do for the rest of our lives. So Michael encouraged me to start a team, and we talk every other week or a couple times a month for 8 or 9 months. And I finally said, you know what, maybe I should start a team. So I did finally listen to Coach Michael, and with my wife's blessing, we started the Jennifer Landro real estate team. So she is kind of the point person on it, and I'm the systems guy in the background, doing the training, doing the systems, organizing lead routing, organizing lead acquisition, things like that. And 14, 15 months after starting that team, we had about 16 or 17 agents on the team. We were easily pacing to do over 300 deals for the group. And it didn't take too long before one of our agents said that they were leaving. And I was crushed because I really liked her. And she said, well, I love you, but I need to move to Milwaukee. And I said, well, that's terrible, but that's 100 miles away. I'm different MLS, nothing I can do. And then I had my weekly or biweekly call with Michael, and he said, you sound down. I said, yeah, I'm a little down because I'm losing one of my really promising young agents, really have a lot of hope for. But he said, how could you ever lose an agent without talking to me first? I said, well, that doesn't matter. There's no reason to talk to you. She's moving 100 miles away. She's moving to Milwaukee. I told him she's moving to Milwaukee. He said, well, how far is that? 100 miles. He said, that's nothing. That's in your market. I'm like, no, it's not. We called her, we talked to her, we reorganized, and now in my email inbox, I've got the lease paperwork so that we can actually open brick and mortar in Milwaukee. So
that's awesome.
He is excited about that, and so are the other agents that we have working with us in Milwaukee. So it's a great team. They've already put 6 deals under contract this year, which, I mean, it's the 15th of January. Our internet just unfroze like 3 days ago, so it's not too bad.
And by unfroze, you don't mean like electronically. You just mean it was so cold the internet froze. That's Wisconsin. So, you skipped over the best part of that story. We were well, not the best part, but one of my favorite parts. I remember that phone call when you had said, oh, well, it's not our market, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you got to do this. And you're like, well, I don't know. She's already canceled her license and she's moved on. And I said, well, does she like you? Yeah. Well, do you like her? Yeah. Well, okay, get her on the phone, like right now. And so Brandon's like, what? Okay. And so he literally gets her on the phone right then and there. And I call and I'm talking to her with Brandon. So we get a 3-way call. And I'm like, hey, do you enjoy being on the team? Yeah, I really loved it. It was hard to move, blah, blah, blah. And you've already moved to a new company, right? Yeah, I already moved to this new company. I said, listen, wouldn't it be great if you could have all the tools, technology, systems, and support that you had in Appleton? Wouldn't it be great if you could have that in Milwaukee with Brandon? Well, yeah, I'd love that, blah, 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 blah. Fantastic. And she committed right there on the phone. She's like, okay, I'm doing it. Let's go. And all of a sudden, Brandon's got an expansion team. And you're killing it there. 6 transactions already this year. And by the way, as of the recording of this video, it's the 15th of the month. So, 6 transactions in the first 15 days of the year. Fantastic. And that's an expansion team.
Right. That's with 5 agents in that market right now. So now that we have our lease in place, we're going to get a little bit more serious about recruiting down there. We made a schedule for me to be there every week. And it's part of the commitment that you have to make if you're going to expand. And I know that we have other coaches in Club Wealth who do expansion on even a bigger scale geographically, and they're in different states. So being in one place or another week to week is not possible. It's not realistic anyway. But for me, being 100 miles away, being less than a 2-hour drive away, there's no reason that I can't be there every week and giving as much support to those people every week as I give and have been with our Appleton agents, and how I got them off the ground as fast as we kind of have a history and a track record of doing so.
Go ahead, Brian.
So Brandon, and I think you hit on something that's very important. As someone who's done expansion, failed at expansion, succeeded at expansion, just all the iterations throughout the whole thing. If I could go back in time, I would move myself, have a different location, and then have an expansion team an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours away. I'm a little jealous in my market. Realistically, the closest expansion market that I could have that would be reasonable is probably 4 or 5 hours away. That being said, I think a lot of people want to go and just do this. Hey, we need to go over here. We need to go over here. I know somebody in Houston, so I should start an expansion team there. It's so much easier when it's when it's an extreme extension of your local market. Because again, if you have a crisis there right now, you can hang up this phone call and be there in 2 hours. Whereas if you're sick, having plane right away, it not only can't you do that, but you also won't. And I don't know how else to say that, but the reality is, if you're looking at expansion, if you're watching this webinar, and you're like, yeah, I want to expand. It's great because Brandon had so much success and I want to follow his model. By the way, do it. But the first thing you want to look at is, can I do it without changing states? Because that's one of the biggest things that people have to deal with. People call me sometimes and they're like talking to me about a contract in another state. I don't know. I've never studied there. And even though I've studied that contract, I'm still not nearly as proficient on it as the state that I'm in. And I just want everyone to know the best place to start expansion is in your same state, because all the rules still apply, and there's no, you'll have some board differences, but at the end of the day, you understand the contract and you understand the process from A to Z. And I think that that's really important. And congratulations on having that opportunity.
I think also not only for all the reasons you just mentioned, Brian, I 100% agree. It makes it a lot easier if you can drive there versus having to get on a plane there. It's funny, I was listening to Dolph the Roos back in the day. I don't know if you guys remember Dolph the Roos. He was a big investor guru guy. And I was listening to an event he was doing one day, and he says, you never buy an investment property anywhere you can't drive to, for the same reason, right? And so the other thing that came to my mind as you were talking about that, Brandon, do you have an official team leader there now, or are you really kind of acting as the team leader in that area right now?
I think it's a bit of a hybrid.
So kind of like a squad leader, and you're being.
I think that's more of an accurate depiction for the people that are more familiar with kind of the terms that we use with Club Wealth. A squad leader being somebody like in Appleton, in my current office, I have a couple of squad leaders, just because the number of people, it wasn't fair for me to say, well, come to me with everything, any questions that you have, any problems that you have, because as I get more and more watered down, I just wasn't available as quickly as I needed to be. So Marion, the original agent who persuaded me to move in that direction, has taken on that role. She's meeting with them, going over scripting. She's going over their CRM, practicing with them. I'm doing Zoom video conferences with them to make myself, it's more real. That's the reason that we do this instead of just an audio call. It's more real when you can look at somebody and see who they are and see their expression, their tone, their inflection. When they're looking at their phone and not listening to you. So we've done as much as we can, but Marion is really stepped up into kind of that squad leader role for me, where she's boots on the ground all the time. One of the hardest working 21-year-old I've ever met. It's pretty cool.
Well, but to your point, okay, so you've got essentially a squad leader level person in that market. But what makes that possible? Because Brian and I and Sri and I, Brian and I, we've been having this conversation about the importance of having good leadership in the markets we go in, and what a difference that makes. And you're able to get away with, instead of having to have a team leader level person there, you're able to have someone who's maybe at that squad leader level currently, because you can go and you can fill in those gaps. If you were not going there, and this is something you and I have talked about on our coaching calls quite a bit, is the necessity for you to go there on a weekly basis right now to really launch that market properly, to bring the value to the agents and that, on that team, to recruit while you're there, so you're killing multiple birds with one stone, right? So you're there to support the team, but you're also recruiting on those weekly trips. And again, to Brian's point, if you had to get on a plane to do that, chances are you just wouldn't. And I don't know that you can build, and somebody will prove me wrong and whatever, but I have not seen anyone really be as amazing at building a remote expansion team that they have to fly to and had the success with it that you're already having with your team that you can just drive to.
I think the allure of starting that expansion team in a market that you have to fly to is usually this kind of the same thing that made me expand to Milwaukee. Your aunt has her real estate license and she's always been a mediocre real estate agent, but you think, man, I could really help her and I could build something around her. And maybe you could, but what you are forgetting is the value that you as a team leader are bringing to your team, how much they are growing because of you. And when you take yourself out of the equation and all you have is somebody else who really enjoys what you do, but maybe hasn't developed the leadership skill set yet, why are you going a 3-hour flight away when, my local market has roughly 500,000 people in it. Milwaukee has 26% of the people that live in my state live in Milwaukee Metro. It's 1.5 million people out of 5.7 million in the state. The prices are higher. The people are all there. The inventory is there. The agents there have different issues than the agents in our market, but it's still relatable because I know where it is. I know I've been there. I understand the areas, and they're getting that benefit from me that our Appleton, Green Bay agents are getting from us here. So I just feel like you're being drawn to expand into a market that you have no idea about because you happen to know somebody who happens to have a real estate license, as opposed to going and finding that person in markets that you do know and you can take better care of.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I think as agents, I don't know if you guys do this, Brian and Brandon, but I certainly do. I have to fight myself to not do this. But there are times when I feel like I just take on projects, right? Because I know I can help this person, and oh my gosh, I know I can make this work. And I forget that, man, I got all this other stuff going on, and dude, I might have to spend a lot of time with that particular person to get them productive, to make this situation work. And as I'm hearing you say this, I'm thinking about the lessons that Brian and Sharina have been learning through our experiences with expansion and the importance of, having that leadership in place. And I agree. I don't think there's any substitute for you, the team leader, right? I just, and Brian and Sharina in our case, I think, really markets that we should be focusing on are markets that, Brian can drive to, or I can drive to, or Cherie can drive to, so that, and then we need to have that commitment level where we say, okay, well, I'll go do a meeting once a week in that market. I'll spend a day a week in that market. And I almost think if you're not willing to do that, it's going to be a much steeper uphill battle. I don't know, Brian, what are your thoughts?
So Brandon, and this is what I thought as you were talking. So the hybrid model that he kind of has, he basically has a squad leader. I want to say glorified, that's not the right word, but just slightly above what I would call a squad leader. I've got 3 of them on my team locally. But to the point, though, is what I've found is that the Brandon can step in and answer every single question. Whereas, again, if I'm trying to answer a contract question in the state of California, I'm licensed in Arkansas. I've never done a real estate transaction in California. I just don't know the answer to that question. So it really changes the person that I need. If you can stay basic, I don't know what the term we're going to call it, hyper local, extreme local. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. But if you can stay within that certain radius where all the rules are exactly the same, then it's much, much easier to expand. Because again, someone says, how many days do you have before the inspections due? Well, I know that off the top of my head. In California, how many days are before the inspections start? I don't know. So, and I don't think it's good to try and figure that out. I think that is a different person that I need to have. So, and again, a team leader that is going to run my entire team in a state that I'm not even licensed in, I've got to pay that person more. I've got to have a person who's more dedicated than that. It's a really hard person to find, and it's a hard person to find for 2 reasons. First of all, the people who are super good at that stuff, Most of them are building their own teams and don't want you because they're like, I've already got all these systems and models in places. I don't need you. So really, to find that person, you're looking for that potential person who you see who hasn't quite done it yet, and all they need is a little bit of guidance. And so, it's a really fine line to walk. And again, if you don't learn anything else from this webinar, start local, because I was coaching an agent who was in a market who could expand like 10 times right around within an hour and a half. I mean, literally different cities there in Texas. So, so much opportunity there. And to Brandon's point, he went from a market that was 500,000 to a market that was 1.5 million. So you've got triple the opportunity there. If you have the same market share in location A that you have in location B, you've got triple the business, higher price points, things that we haven't necessarily talked about. But, you don't want to go into a market where the average sales price is $150,000 as an expansion team. I don't care how good the leader is. That is a real challenge. I mean, so don't go backwards. Things you want to look at is leadership opportunities. You want to look at the people that you've got there. And then you need to look at realistically market saturation and price point, because, at the end of the day, if I close 5 transactions a month, is that worth $20,000 to me? Is that worth $5,000 to me? So, got to do all that. And the beauty of it being local is you can figure that out relatively quickly and relatively easy.
Yeah, I very much agree with kind of analyzing those price points, because if you're in a market that's already a 600 price point, fine. If you want to expand into something that's going backwards, then do that, because you can afford to do that. But the people that are in those $150,000 and $170,000 price points are looking for ways to expand out of them. So don't be the one who's expanding into them.
Don't go backwards.
Grab the market share that they're like, this is too hard to profit. You also have to look at, what are your primary lead sources and how do those convey into the new market? Is it something I've had very, very few things that we have done that we have had agents in one market say we love it, and agents in the other market say it's not working here. But I know that if I start crossing state lines, I'm going to get more of that. I'm also going to have to buy different systems. I'm going to have to buy additional. What things can you just duplicate for no additional cost when you're expanding into a different market? And what things do you have to bring in do you need a new CRM because you're going into a new MLS? Or does your CRM allow you to add a second MLS spot into it and allow you to continue to do that?
And I think that's a really important thing to look at. So here's something that we found, for example, for a period of time, we were going to have an expansion team in Denver. And, our main source of leads for expansion is realtor.com. Well, guess what? I couldn't buy any. It wasn't that I wasn't willing to. It was literally, I would send my account rep stuff for multiple states in Denver. How many got in Denver? None. So, that's a reality too. If you're going to go into a different market and you're a Zillow guy, a realtor.com guy, Ylopo, whatever, Sync, whatever it is that you're using, you better make sure that you can go in there and buy leads if that's your model. That's our model. We buy leads, we prospect, but ultimately, if I can't buy any leads, and that's what I'm promising my team, I need to do that research before I join the MLS and do all this other stuff. So, definitely look at that. Just because you can buy leads in your local market doesn't mean that you can buy them in a different market. There's different demands and different price points of those leads too. So when you sit down and figure out ROI, so you're paying $50 a lead in location A, and all of a sudden you're paying, $95 a lead in location B. The average sales price is the same. So right there, all those things are really important to look at to make sure that you're not just going, headlong into something without having any opportunity to know what's going to happen.
Sounds like you're talking about running a business like an actual business. I think that's probably a good idea, right? It's funny. Well, and I'm laughing because, a lot of people just don't think of that, but it's important. The other thing, and you guys kind of touched on this a little bit, and it's important. And I hope everybody that's watching right now listens very carefully to this. You guys, when you expand into another market, you got to remember to continue to do business in the market you're in, right? Because that market is feeding the other market. And for most of the people watching this, when you expand into your first area, you're going to lose some freaking money. You're not going to go make money there instantly. You're going to have a period of time where you're feeding that with money out of your other market. It's really important to be aware of this. And it's really, really important that you continue to do a really good job with your local team, keep them inspired and motivated, and help them be successful as well. Furthermore, another thing that I'm seeing that's working really well is when somebody starts in one market, right? So they start, it doesn't matter whether they must start in market A, and that's where their team is, and they build this team, they do really well there. And then they say, okay, I'm going to go to another market and I'm just going to come back and visit market A. So I'm going to go move physically. I'm going to go live in market B, but I'm going to continue to go back and I'm going to visit market A once a week. That's actually really a lot easier than doing it the other way around if you're willing to move, which most people aren't. But if you are willing to move, or maybe you're even desirous to move, that's a great way to do it for two reasons. Number one, because you've got the leadership in place where you were in market A to make up for you being gone. You've got squad leaders in place. You've got staff in place. You've got all the people there that you need to keep things working well before you make that move to market B. When you go into market B, now you're there, and it takes somebody with high energy and that's really focused and game on to make that happen and to grow that market. And who better than you? So I don't know. What do you think, guys?
If you're willing to do it, yeah. I'm married and I've got kids in school, so it was never happening for me. But
no, I think that's
I can see how it would be easier to make that leap. But I think the more important topic that you touched on there is don't start a team if you don't have cash in the bank. Do not start. Anybody can go onto Fiverr and get that same 3-house logo made for $5. But that does not make a team. You need resources. And that resource, I was having this conversation with my wife at lunch yesterday. I said, the biggest expense that we have for us as a team, for us is leads, because we buy a lot of leads. The second biggest expense, and I don't know if this ever even really occurred to her directly, but the second biggest expense of our team is me stepping out of production. Mm-hmm. And I had to do it to be able to support the number of agents that we did. So if you think that you're going to start a team, or if you're going to start an expansion team with no money in the bank, thinking that you're going to start turning dollars day one, well, I got news for you. Even if you get 3 great agents who come on day one with all their cousins waiting to buy houses, you're still not making any money for 45 days. You're still losing money for 6 weeks. And that's probably going to continue for a little while. So if you're not prepared for that, I thought about it like when I added, radio advertising. I wasn't going to do it day one if I wasn't prepared to do it for a year. So I wrote that $50,000 check. And my market radio is cheap. I know in some of your markets that might get you a month.
Yeah, I was going to say I was at about 30 to 40. So Brian, you were going to say something.
But I wouldn't do it if you weren't committed to doing it, because you can't. You're dealing with people's lives and people's incomes, and it's your job to support them and give them the systems. Michael and I have said this and talked about this quite a bit. It's our job to build the systems to allow them to be successful. It's their job to become successful, put in the work. Yep. If you're not building the systems, you're not doing your part. And if you don't have the resources and the time, you're not doing your part. So that would be.
Well, you have all the control in the world over the one and almost none on the other. So go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so I think to Brandon's point, and again, unfortunately, there's no free education that I'm aware of. I guess you can watch our webinars and get super smart. But all these things don't always impact you until they impact you directly. And understanding that, radio, for example, I know that I ran radio ads for at least 5 months before I got a single phone call. And it was like, wow. I was super excited. I'm like, hey, maybe I can get my ROI positive. Still isn't quite there, but it's definitely something that's helping us. Expansion's kind of the same way. You've got to understand that you're going to do that. The things that I want people to look at is if they're looking at expansion is which models are duplicatable. So for example, I use Follow Up Boss. So it's very easy for me to take Follow Up Boss and give it to everybody on an expansion team. That works just fine. Again, I don't know if that works with Commissions Inc. and Firepoint and all these other I don't know. I don't use that. But, again, I know that I can give them a CRM and I can turn that on instantly. So instead of spending an additional $500 a month, I don't have to worry about that. It's nice to have those things and understand the things that are 100% duplicable. To your point earlier, Brandon, the most expensive thing that I've ever had to do in my business was step out of my business. So, here's a comparison. I made in 2017 versus 2018, the first 6 months of the year, personal production $120,000 less. And that, when I saw that number, it kind of choked me up a little bit. I was like, holy smokes, that's a lot of money. But at the end of the day, I couldn't build my team and sell 75 houses a year. Maybe there's people out there who can. I just didn't have the bandwidth or the desire. I don't know. I can't. At the end of the day, sometimes you got to sleep. Sometimes you got to find things that work for you. So, understand that and listen to that number. If you're a person who's saying, I'm going to step out of production, great. I think there's a lot of power in that. I think there's a lot of ability to build your business. But how does $120,000 in GCI decrease sound to you? No one's excited about that. So, and again, we've offset that by getting more agents and doing other things, but it's a real thing. And I want to say 95% of the agents I've ever talked to as starting in coaching, that's all their goal. And again, I'm not against it. I think it's great, but understand the impact and understand all the hard work you're going to have to do before you just say, you know what, I don't ever have to sell a house again. So, just keep that in mind.
Too many people say that not too early, way too early. When you are 75% of your team's production and you step out, that is way too early.
It's a huge problem.
For the first 2.5 years that I had a team, I personally outsold my entire team for the first 2.5 years. All of them. Yeah. And again, that's not to brag about that. It's just that's the reality. And there takes a time to get that to where you've got agents who are up and running and understand that real estate's an extremely simple business, but it's not an easy business.
I remember, and I bet you do as well, the first month that our office agents outsold me and Jenny. Oh my gosh, that was like, I was never so happy to get beat by somebody.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So in 2018, I'm not the number one agent on my team. And that makes me so excited. I did, by the way. And, here's something else. And I'm not sure if this is the road we were planning on going down, but I want people to think about this. It's important is, would your team fall apart without your production? And why do you want to get out of, what are you doing that is more productive? So for example, I had a conversation with somebody one time. They said, hey, somebody called me, wanted me to list their $400,000 house, and I didn't want to do it. And it was a past client. So, for me, that's an hour's worth of my time. It's a $400,000 house. That's $12,000 in commission for about 3 hours of work. So is there something else I'm doing that's making me $4,000 an hour? If so, by all means, go do it. But if not, maybe you go list that house. And again, that's just a philosophy that I'm throwing out there to people, because again, with my system, I sign the paperwork, hand it over to my listing and marketing manager. The next time I have a conversation is either to do a price reduction or because we have an offer. So, realistically on the list side, if you've got all these systems in place, it only takes you an hour to list a house. And just something to consider if you're a person who wants to get out of production. Don't give away the low-hanging fruit. So is kind of where I'm at on that.
It only takes you a small amount of your time, but what you are, and I absolutely hate the analogy of real estate agents getting compared to doctors, because they went to school for a whole lot longer than me, and most of them are a whole lot smarter than me. But what you are not paying them $800 for a short appointment for that piece of their time. What you're paying for them is all their experience and education, so that you can trust them to put a needle in your arm, put it to sleep, and then cut your veins open, and it's going to all come back together.
Sure.
They didn't learn that in 10 minutes, and you didn't learn how to list that house in that you didn't get paid for that 3 hours. You got paid for the systems, the administrative people, the experience that you have, the knowledge that you have, the trust that referral has in you personally. So I do agree. There is a time, and I told our team, I did about 40 sales last year. My goal this year was to do 6. And the only reason the goal wasn't 0 is because I think realistically there's going to be 6 times this year where I'm just like, all right, I'll go do it.
Right. And to me, that's, that doesn't mean that Brandon's out lead generating every day. What that means is his best friend called, his brother called, a house that he's sold 5 different listings to called because he wants them to sell another house. Those are the easy things that we do, and, take advantage of that. That's great. And, I'll probably sell 10 to 15 houses this year. I'm not lead generating for those. That's my team's job. That's what they do. And I give them that. But ultimately at the end of the day, yeah, I've got a house that's coming up. Again, I've sold the guy three houses. He's moving to another state. I spent 15 minutes with him. The house will be on the market, so those are the things I'm suggesting that you do to leverage yourself, because again, that's worth somewhere in the range of $2,000 to $3,000 an hour for me. As soon as every task I can do makes me $3,000 an hour, I'll stop listing those easy houses.
Okay, so to riddle me this. So Brandon, you're in Milwaukee now, in addition to Appleton. You have 5 agents in Milwaukee, is that right?
Correct.
How did you find
more interviews this Friday?
What's that?
5 currently, more interviews on Friday.
Okay, so how many interviews do we have on Friday?
4 interviews confirmed. So
fantastic.
Knowing what I know, 2 show up.
Yeah, and that's okay. That's all right, because at least we know 2 will show up, right? So, but what I want to key in on is a couple of things. Number one, are you using WiseHire at all?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you are using
number one. I'm running 4 or 5 ads on WiseHire at any given time.
Love it. Okay, and that's good. And for you guys, WiseHire, for those of you that don't know this, WiseHire sponsors Club Wealth TV, and we love them, right? Go to clubwealth.com/WiseHire, or it might be wisehire.com/Club Wealth. I can't remember, but you get the discount there. And at the end of the day, they're great, right? They do a really good job of helping to feed that pipeline on the front of the funnel. What your 5 people that you've got in Milwaukee now, where did they come from? How did you find those 5?
The one came in through WiseHire and then eventually moved to Milwaukee. So that's kind of what started everything. But WiseHire gets credit for that.
Cool.
Second one that came on was also through WiseHire.
Okay.
Third one that came on was through WiseHire. And the 4th and 5th one were our agents talking and letting other agents that they worked with know that there's an opportunity over here.
Okay, so this is good. I like where we're going with this. So, okay, so you've got a couple of different lead sources, right? It's just like in your real estate business. You got to have multiple lead sources. You cannot have one freaking lead source. Ideally, you want to have a whole bunch of them. So, I don't need one lead source that gets me 1,000 transactions a year. I need 500 lead sources that give me 2 transactions a year, right? I want to have that diversity. Maybe that's a little extreme, but a little bit, but you get the point, right? Like I'd rather have 20 transactions bringing me 50 transactions, or 20 lead sources bringing me 50 transactions a year each, because now I'm diversified. And when one dries up, the rest are still kicking off leads. This is the same thing in your recruiting efforts. So with those ones that the agents brought in, what are you doing to incentivize those agents to bring people in? Are you paying them a whole bunch of money? Or are you doing, what are you doing?
I do actually pay our agents a referral on the first 10 transactions that somebody that they bring in does. That happens for our brokerage, for our team in Appleton, our team in Milwaukee, that if you start the conversation for me and you think that they're a good fit, I think that's a really good referral, because I don't think that it's not enough money that the agent is going to say, bring this person into my team if they don't like them. And so to me, it's not only the agents helping me identify prospective new ads to the team, but it's helping me identify the right people to add to the team. Somebody that they like is, I like them. So it's probably somebody I'm going to like. And I was having this conversation with some string on Facebook the last few days. And do you hire everybody who interviews for your team or who wants to? I'm like, absolutely not. I turn away way more people than I tell Michael about.
You turkey. Oh my gosh.
So Brandon, let's talk about something in that same line, because this is one of the objections I've heard from a lot of team leaders is, well, my team doesn't want to recruit. So because they feel like there's a scarcity mentality that sometimes comes with that. And I can tell you, when I first had, I had 2 agents on my team, and when I brought that 3rd agent on my team, one of the agents who's no longer with me, oddly enough, was like, wow, do you really want to bring another guy on? Because now what we're doing is we have X number of leads and we're not getting enough leads. We're not going to get enough support. And, one of the things that I've spent ever since that happened is spent a lot of time explaining to our agents how beneficial it is for our team to be bigger, because there are tons of benefits from that. The reality is if you have 2 agents on your team and they're both out showing houses, then you can't help each other. If you got 15, 20, 25, there's always someone who's available to help the other people. So you create leverage around these things, and we have to give benefit to our agents for recruiting people. Otherwise they go into that scarcity mentality of, hey, well, I don't want that, because more agents means less leads. That means less opportunities. It's actually not true, because the truth of the matter is the more transactions we do, the more likely HomeLight sends me more leads now. Effective Agent sends me more leads now. Zoom sends me. Anybody I sign up with goes, wow, you guys did 300, 400, 500 transactions versus you guys did 10 transactions last year. They're not excited about that. And there's not the synergy that's created. So if agents don't understand that on your team, make sure you're explaining to them it's not just the money you're going to pay them, but it will literally help them if we work together. And that's, how have you gone about that? Have you done similar things?
I absolutely agree, because it's all sorts of different pieces that go into that. But they have to know, and trust that I'm never going to let the lead generation just plateau and keep piling on agents. I'm not going to operate like that. There's always going to be an abundance. When they get to the point where they are working all of the leads, they're claiming them as fast as they should be, they're calling them, they're going through their cycle of follow-ups that they should be, then I'm going to get more leads, because they're going to be closing more deals. I'm going to throw more at that. When they're getting to the point where they're only claiming a lead in 3 minutes and they're only calling it once the first day, to me, that just says, well, there's too much there.
Time to hire more agents.
They can't keep up in the way that we want. But they know that I absolutely preach to them, and I make it crystal clear that when I stepped out of production, my only purpose in my working life is to make them build systems for them to be successful. So anything that's contrary to that, I won't do it. If I figure out it's contrary to that, I'll stop doing it. And I'm going to continue to find new ways that I can help them improve their business. We're hiring a showing assistant for the team, because we need people. We have people who are reaching out to our internal Facebook group saying, can somebody pick up this shift so that I can go and show these houses? Or can somebody go and show these houses so I can go to a home inspection? I'm like, guys, why don't we just get somebody with a license who doesn't care to go out and show houses, but make themselves available to everybody, so that we have more opportunity, because our agents are busy, because we buy a lot of leads. And if anybody is out there, and well, there is going to be somebody out there right now thinking that's all they do is buy leads and that's how they make it all work. I am absolutely not against buying leads. I think the real estate agents who think, oh, buying leads online is dumb, it's bad business, I won't ever do it. I run it like a business. There's a cost of customer acquisition, and there's a return on my investment. When those things are in harmony and those things are working well together, I'm going to keep doing it. McDonald's didn't just sell hamburgers to the people that they knew. They advertised. They sold them to everybody. If you want to grow, you got to advertise. You got to pay to acquire customers. So that's what we did, and we do a lot of it.
Absolutely.
One of the things too that you talked about, and sorry, Dan, Coach Dan Balcher just walked in. Check it out. Say hi to Dan. Woo! All right. So that said, when you talk about growth and you talk about, okay, when we add more agents, how does that impact the other agents already on the team? One of the things that you guys didn't mention, and you mentioned a lot of great benefits from that, but one of the things you didn't mention that's huge is the market dominance, right? Now, everywhere you go, you're seeing more of your signs. You're involved in more transactions. You're all over that marketplace more than you were before, and that attracts more business. Frankly, signs are one of the biggest pieces of this, right? The more signs I got in the ground, the more interest I have in my team. And that doesn't just go for the yard sign. That goes for like bandit signs. It goes for directional arrows, the whole 9 yards. But all of a sudden now, I've got better momentum, and the perception in the marketplace is that we are the ballers, and that attracts people to our team, both in terms of clients and in terms of additional agents that want to join our team. So that momentum is really, really important, and it takes a while to get to that momentum. You've got to be at that 250 to 300 transactions a year mark before you even begin to start feeling it. But once you get there, it takes off. It's like a locomotive, right? It takes a little bit of time to get it going down the track, but once it is, it's got momentum. It's hard to stop.
I absolutely agree. And I think there are agents in our structure. We have we have team leads, listing agents, we have buyers agents, we have transaction coordinators. So we have agents who are exclusively working with buyers. And I always just let them know, in your first year in real estate, or if you're an agent who's not producing at a high level, on an average year, you're going to list 2 or 3 houses. I don't care if that's at 100% or if you find a brokerage that'll pay you 200%. It's not enough money to live on.
Yep.
You're not going to find a brokerage who'll pay you 200%.
You guys won't do that? Come on.
Let me know.
Yeah, exactly. We're all going there.
But if you have 10 other agents on the team who all would have had 2 listings fall in their lap this year, well, then that's 20 listings that the team is advertising together, that the team is holding open, that the team is doing massive Facebook advertising on, coming soon listings, that the team is leveraging that for you. And in our case, we're paying them a referral on those leads, even though all they ever have to do is kind of give us a name, and we go and take care of everything else, and they're getting paid when the thing closes.
So this is an interesting discussion to have. So I did something about 8 months ago. The reason I did is I kept getting this conversation. Brandon, as a team leader, you'll probably get it too. Why can't I list houses? Why can't I list houses? Why can't I? And here's the thing. My philosophy is pretty simple, and I think Brandon said, so I want to reiterate it. When you work with buyers, you get really good at working with buyers. When you work just with sellers, so you get really good at working with sellers. So the last thing we want to do is take a $150 realtor.com lead, go show them a house, and then go give them a listing presentation from the same buyer's agent. That buyer agent screws that up, not because they're a bad person, but because they've done one listing presentation in the last 6 months. And now not only did we lose the listing, but we lost the buyer because now they think the agent's incompetent because their listing presentation is horrible. That's an extreme example. But
it happens.
It's very true, because the National Association of Realtors does their profile of home buyers and sellers. And they interview all these sellers, and they say, how many real estate agents did you talk to before you picked something? The average is just a buzz over 3. Mm-hmm. So for simplicity, let's say it's 3. So let's say that the 3 agents are me, Brian Curtis, and somebody who's had a license for 8 minutes. Well, who's going to get the listing? It's either it's going to be me.
Of course.
Brian, if I have an off day, Brian's got a chance. But the agent who's only been on 3 listing appointments is really, and this isn't anything against that. We were all new at one point. We all did our first, and we all screwed up our first opportunity at some point.
Yes.
But why do you want to do that when you can kind of tap in the ringer and say, go get it? And you know they're coming back 85% of the time with their listings, and you're still getting paid.
Yeah, I can tell you, and this is not to pat myself on the back, but I got in 2017 is the last time I've done this, but I got every single one of those that was referred by one of my listing agents to me in 2017. And that's not because I'm super awesome. It's because I'm good at the listing presentation, and it's a really, really, really strong lead. So that's how important it is in my mind to send somebody who's good, and you've already got the credibility. So, and I'll say this though, this is the switch that we made to kind of compensate for the fact that I hear this over and over again. We let them list their sphere now, because to somebody's point to me, but you said the reason that you didn't want me to do it is because I would lose the listing potentially. I'm not going to lose my mom. I'm not going to lose my brother. I'm not going to lose my best friend because they like me. So I let people list their sphere now, and it's been that stopgap in between that complaint. Because to your point earlier, if I'm going to go be a single agent, I'm going to list 2 houses. Who are those people going to be? They're going to be your mom and your brother, or your best friend from high school, or somebody you went to church with, or whatever. That's who you're listing anyway. So I let them do that. And I'm not saying you should, but I can tell you it's been a pretty successful program for us. And it works out pretty well because they use all of our systems. They, just like me, when I take a listing, I hand it to my listing and marketing manager. That person handles everything from that point forward anyway. We're doing the same thing. So that's what I'm doing out there. And it's helped morale around listings.
So let's talk about this really quick, because I want to come back to Corey's question. Corey Smallman had a question here a few minutes ago. He said, when do you know it's time to expand into a new market? Is it when an opportunity presents itself, or after you have achieved significant market share in your existing market?
I would say you're going to rely more on the latter part the former part. the opportunity needs to be there. I think that's incredibly helpful, but it's also ties into if you've had significant success in your existing market, a couple of things should be the case. You should have some money set aside. If you're broke, you have not had significant success in your existing market. I know a lot of agents who sell a lot of homes and don't make any money because they spend $1 to make $1.04. So if that's your system, please don't go duplicate. Don't go duplicate that. But if you have a running, well-oiled machine and you're like, you know what, I could step away and spend a little bit of attention on something else right now, and I've got the resources, the capital, so I need the time and the money to put into this. Then it
Brandon, I think what you just said really illustrates a very important point, which is that expanding into new markets, it magnifies everything you're doing, whether good or bad, it magnifies it, right? So if you're making mistakes in your existing market, they're going to be magnified in that next market. If you're doing well in your current market, they're going to be magnified in the next market, because you're not going to do all the stuff that kind of just got, kind of hung out there, right? All the stuff you've been doing just because it's kind of how you've been doing it. You're only going to be doing the stuff that you know is successful. And so that being said, I think it's really important to your point. I think you need to do both, right? I think the opportunity needs to be there, and you need to have the financial wherewithal, meaning you're successful enough in your own market. Brian?
Let me add to that a little bit. So again, coaching someone, why I had someone who had a 10-person team in a city of, let's say, 2.5 million approximately. They wanted to expand. And I'm like, why on earth would you expand? You haven't even tapped what you've got yet. So, if you're in a big market, I think if you've got at least a 0.5% market share, you're probably at a good number. If you're in a small market like mine, you better at least be at 1% before you start talking about expansion. You haven't even tapped the things. And again, in case everybody doesn't know this, and to Michael's point, everything is harder because you're further away. And right. Adding expenses that you're duplicating. And again, doesn't mean it can't be profitable, but start, fishing the stock pond before you start going out and, fishing someplace that you don't know where the good holes are. I mean, there's so many opportunities right there in front of you. Expansion is amazing and I'm all about it, but you got a 4-person team. You don't need to do expansion. You need to build that team, so, yeah,
it's interesting. I've got Todd Sandberg. I see just joined in as watching, and Todd, I don't know if you can hear me. I hope you're listening right now, but I see you being on here live. He's a good friend of mine in Seattle. Here, he owns a bunch of ChemDry franchises, and he's owned franchises in multiple states. And I would be willing to bet that Todd would agree with you that it is a lot easier to what we call build from a center of strength. Right. I look at when I had my business, my local business in Seattle, right? When I was selling real estate in Seattle, I started off in Bonnie Lake, and actually it was in Federway. And then I grew to Bonnie Lake, and then I grew to Tacoma, and then I grew to just north into Kent and Renton. And I started growing, but I was making leaps of 5, 10, 15 minutes away, not an hour away or 2 hours away or 5 hours away. I eventually grew into those areas. And it was more affordable, it was easier, and it was natural. And what that also allowed me to do is I had coverage, right? Because the other thing that happens is when you go into a new market, you all of a sudden start bringing in leads in that new market, and somebody's got to freaking service those leads. Well, when you get one agent in that new market and you start having success a little bit, but you start getting these leads, you've got the systems and lead flow and all that in place. And all of a sudden that one agent that you've got in that market decides that this is not the right fit for them, and they leave. Well, dude, you just spent a boatload of money on leads that now nobody's following up on. And so what I would suggest that not only do you need to be really careful about what market you need to go into, but when you go into a market, the second you decide you're going to be in a market, you'd better get recruiting quickly, because people are going to freaking leave your team. And so to the point earlier that was made, get the leadership. And then as soon as you've got that, go hog wild, get people on that team and get them trained, make sure your systems are tight. And, hopefully you have some good success. All right, guys, we've got 2 minutes left. Go ahead, Brian.
So I'll just piggyback that, and that can be my final statement. Understand also that if you don't have the support in place for those people, they will not last.
That's right.
And, again,
we've learned that the hard way.
Believe me, I have. That which seems simplistic is not necessarily simplistic in expansion. So understand that you need to know the cost of leads. Here's another mistake, and if anyone's lead, you will probably not be successful simply buying pay-per-click leads in an expansion market. You need some good quality, either someone who's going to get listings so you can get sign calls, or some sort of high quality leads that people can follow up with and close in the first 90 days that they're on the team. Because if you're buying all pay-per-click that's all 6 to 18 months out, you're going to basically unemploy someone for 6 months. They're not going to last.
Yep. Yep. Brandon, final thoughts before we wrap up? I agree, by the way, Brian.
Just like real estate, I'm sure most of the people listening to this or listening in the future are real estate agents. Just like real estate is hard, it is not for everybody. Being a team leader is hard. It is not for everybody. Just because it looks attractive doesn't mean that you can do it. And even if you get to the point where you're running a reasonable team, expansion's not for everybody. You have to be willing to put in the work. And I put some post on one of the Club Wealth pages not that long ago about you're going to go broke picking the low hanging fruit. If all you want is those easy deals and you want to make your whole career off of that, it's not going to work. You got to put in the time and you got to put in the money, or you're not going to have the success. So I think that was a great question somebody posed earlier. How do you know when it's time? You need those resources. And I think the most important resource you need is your own time.
I fully agree. I love it. You know what? And there's no substitute for it, especially when you're building an expansion market. Guys, seriously, great conversation. Really appreciate your time today, both of you, and the lessons learned. And I'll tell you guys, for those of you that haven't considered expanding already, you should be considering. If you're a team leader right now, you should at least be considering it. Have the conversation with your coach. Don't do it until you and your coach agree that it's the right time and that you're the right person to make it happen. That said, really appreciate today's conversation. Everybody, have an awesome day. Remember, go to clubwealth.com/TV. Subscribe to our podcast there. These conversations that we have on Club Wealth TV Live get transcribed into a podcast so you can listen to the audio and you can see some written comments on there as well. Have an awesome day. And remember, you guys, at the end of the day, there's a world-class beast just dying to get out. You got to choose to unleash that beast. So go do something at a world-class level today. Have a great day, everybody.
All right. Thanks. Bye.